Derrick, over lunch, I couldn't help but eavesdrop on you and Steve talking about your job and how you are really into the grassroots level and helping bring a movement for what we want. And as a grassroots organization here, we're trying to move the state of Wisconsin toward more passenger rail. And I think one of the things we need to hear from you is how best to do that in the quickest way possible, of course, but also you mentioned the economic benefits of train, and you've all touched on that. And I'm really very interested on return on investment and that kind of thing. When I'm talking to conservatives, I want to be able to look at the business side of things and say, do you realize for every dollar we spend on rail, we get $7 back, we get this much in tourism. How important is that, or am I going down the wrong path?
No, Susan, I think you're partway there. I would suggest, and again, those who have decided to put their hat into the political ring, we appreciate you and we thank you for getting in that space. But I feel like in today's political environment, it's not always about the facts. Sometimes you really you need to have the facts in your pocket to be able to deliver them, but you also need to know your audience. And I think what's really important are the stories. And when I say the stories, it's meeting folks on the grassroots level, getting folks engaged in the local legislative districts where you're trying to sway a vote, and getting those folks to tell their stories to their elected leaders. Because they're always getting facts thrown at them. When I clerked in the Iowa legislature, we got so much mail, so many pamphlets, so many documents, but in the end, what really mattered to the legislator that I worked for is what was he hearing back home from the district, the people who had the authentic stories about how these issues affect their lives. That's why I think it was really important that the Passenger Rail Caucus was able to get on the train. Because when I was at Amtrak, one of my most effective tools to sway legislators and to get them to understand how this really impacts normal people's lives was to get them out to the station and to get them on a passenger train. Every year I would invite the entire not the entire Michigan legislature, but the leadership and the chairman of the committees and the folks that are on the transportation and the approps committee, I would get them on a train from Lansing to Chicago. And I would always do it on a Friday because that was kind of an off day in the legislature. And they would go to that station, which is the station for another Big Ten school. And they would see 200 people getting on that train. And many of those folks were their constituents and knew who they were. And then they would ride the train to Chicago and they would get it. And so for a decade and a half, never really had trouble getting an appropriation out of the Michigan legislature, no matter who was controlling the aisle, because they saw that the constituents were riding the trains and how valuable the trains were. Touching on the economy, and I'll wrap it up quick, sorry. The economic piece is real important. And one of the benefits that I think we as advocates have in the state of Wisconsin is an industrial state. A tool that we always used was something called the Amtrak fact sheet, which showed how much money Amtrak spent with vendors and companies in the state of Wisconsin just to run the passenger rail system. And it was always a fairly significant number. And so it shows that, to your point about the return on investment, every dollar that we invest in passenger rail gets churned back into the economy, which creates jobs for folks. And so that's an important piece to have. And as part of the coalition, one of the things that I know that Scott and I and others have worked on is finding representatives of those firms to kind of step up and say, this is how passenger rail investment affects my organization. One of the best letters we got, and I'll be quiet, one of the best letters of support we got for the new Borealis service was from the Tommy Bartlett Water Show in Wisconsin Dells. And one of the things that we learned going up and down the route to try and get these communities to buy into that second train was that many of these communities were having trouble keeping and retaining talent. And Wisconsin Dells talked about all these folks that came from elsewhere in the world, who were folks from Europe and folks from Asia. They would work in Wisconsin Dells, but then when they got off on the weekends or whatever their break was, they wanted to go to, say, their ethnic enclave in Chicago. But how did they get there? And so it's a tool for that retention.
That was fabulous, thank you. And when you bring up about being fiscally conservative, it kind of drives me nuts a little bit because I think it's more fiscally responsible to invest in things, to invest in our people, to invest in our state, because we always know that you get a bigger return on investment than when you just cut programs or cut funding to certain things, right? Or maintain where you're at, because you always need to be investing. And that's how we're told, like, we need to invest in our 401k so that it can build. And that's what we should be doing with our state as well. So when I hear for every dollar that's invested, you get $7 back, that's a good return, I think, that I want to put my money into. So I would just push back on when people say that we can't invest or put the dollars in there, because certainly it's an investment that we'll get back sevenfold.
Well, one thing I wanted to say was this train trip that was mentioned that our two legislators here got to go on recently. To give credit where credit is due, one of our allied organizations, All Aboard Wisconsin, and especially Gary Goki, played a key role in organizing that, I believe. So thank you for doing that. It's so important to give people that first-hand experience.
Can I just add something to that economic piece? So we've heard in the news in the last few days that, the price to own a car is like, new vehicles are like $12,000 or $15,000 more. So more and more vehicles are becoming less and less affordable, right? And I'm sure that'll push up the price of used cars as well. But in the area that I live in DeForest, so that whole neck of the woods is growing so fast, and they're begging for workers out there. I mean, we're close to Madison, you would think, oh my gosh, well, you shouldn't have any problem. But, if there were a train that could bring people in again from places that are desperately in need of employment or those types of things, it's just a no-brainer. And it's like Melissa and Eric were saying, it's like you invest, right? You invest in a quarter to make $1 kind of a thing. So I think that's the concept we need to really kind of push to get people to understand that, right? That's an investment in our future. It's not a cost, right?
We shouldn't forget that even though the economic part of trains is so important, it's also sustainable. And I think that's so important today in our society, is to not always look at growing things all the time and economies based on growth, but they should go hand in hand with sustainability. I was wondering if you have any comments on that.
I bet you do.
Oh, I bet you do.
That's all there.
That has always sort of played a role in sort of my personal belief. Again, living in a big city, I remember years ago seeing data about how the amount of carbon pollution a city resident puts out versus somebody who lives in a non-urban environment, because we do so much walking and using transit and things are close. But I will say, and I think we're all in keeping with this, we're sort of preaching to the choir that absolutely the amount of carbon output per passenger mile on trains and transit and buses is much, much lower than it is on sort of more personal gasoline-powered mobility devices. But what I would say is also, again, it's about who's your audience. And sometimes every argument doesn't work with everybody. So you kind of have to watch who, every argument doesn't work for everybody. And I find that as I try to build an and coalition, like Debbie talked about, it's meet people kind of where they are. And the great thing about passenger rail is that it hits so many buttons that, every argument might not work with everybody, but you'll find an argument that does. And when I would go into a legislative district and I would check my vendor list on how much money was spent with companies in that district, and I would drop the name of XYZ Corporation that Amtrak bought so much money from them, boy, that's when their eyes open up. So
I would add to the sustainability wise an argument that we can start using with towns and cities as roads are so expensive to repair and maintain now. And there's so much infrastructure with roads now that needs to be fixed, and there isn't enough funding to fix all the damn roads, as our governor likes to say. We've seen up north that rather than repair roads, they just make them gravel roads instead too, which is not helpful for the agriculture up there. They need roads that can sustain the weight of the vehicles for the agriculture commerce up there. So definitely sustainability, railway makes a lot more sense because it's not as expensive to replace and repair all the roads that are going on here, which also repair vehicles then because the roads aren't being maintained, and so you have all the repairs that are needed there. So that's one sustainability issue that can be brought up.
So I'll just throw a curveball because you said, talk to your audience, right? You want to who's your audience, right? So for joggers and runners and walkers and folks that are on the sidewalks a lot because maybe they don't own a car or whatever, they're sucking in a lot of carbon monoxide into their lungs. There's a lot, I don't know what the statistics are. I'm sure they're out there that folks that live in the, the inner cities of Chicago or places where they're getting those doses that's affecting their, the heart attack rate, strokes, those kind of things. So asthma, you got it. I mean, and the list goes on and on. So, with the healthcare crisis we have going on, we certainly don't need to help the doctors out by providing more business to them, right? So, just think like the slide that you were showing where, look, there's no parking spots. Wouldn't that be cool if you had like a Chicago that it was just train coming through, right? And then, so, and then the folks that are in the vehicles that are sitting in traffic for however long every single day, you're getting doses of that too, so.
And the stress of just sitting in a vehicle in the middle of traffic. That raises the blood pressure.
Oh yeah, especially if you're having a little road rage with the car next door and, we see the movies.
You know what you made me think of?
Oh, yeah.
Another argument that's hard to sort of encapsulate into a statistic is the community building that happens on a train. You talked about when you get off the train, how you've made friends with everybody. My mom, I was born before there was an Amtrak, so we took a train down to my mom's hometown in Georgia several times a year. And a friend that my mom made back in the 60s, they're still friends in the lounge car. I don't know what they were doing. I was probably 3 years old. They were probably playing cards and drinking. This isn't gin, but but that I think that's a way. What trains do is they bring us together. Because of all the different variety of people that you meet on the train. I'm text buddies with 2 Amish people who I have met on the train.
There were a lot of Amish folks on the train. I noticed
Absolutely.
that. Yeah, they use it for motor travel.
When else would you ever have that opportunity, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just one thing more about being sustainable. We know that trains are sustainable because our train cars are 50 years old.
They're fully depreciated.
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Sorry, Rick.
Earlier, we heard from other speakers about the importance of, tell your elected officials that this matters to you. But we now have 2 elected officials here. How important is it to you to hear from your constituents about this? And do you think that you and your colleagues are hearing enough about passenger rail?
Well, you're absolutely right about your audience. So when folks come in to chat with us, again, the numbers and all that kind of stuff are like, I don't retain them. But if somebody tells me a personal story or, some real, gut-wrenching thing that happened and this is why I'm here, that sticks with you. So it does make a difference to, lobby or chat with your, folks that are in office and let them know how you feel about it because it does, it picks up momentum and it makes a difference. So, yeah.
Like get your friends to also email us or call us too. That's really important. And it's not just at the state level, I think the county level, because then they can advocate for this as well to their electeds. at the state level, because it takes all the voices to keep pushing for it ultimately. It helps get the word out, and not just to us, right? Like it's telling throughout the whole state, all of us, the importance of it. And if I can go back 1 second to the map about where the railway currently goes. I was born in Green Bay, grew up in Wausau, and then moved down to the Madison area. 3 areas where there is not rail service at all. And when I think about the traffic from Illinois that goes up north, how much better would that be for our state, for our health of people, to have a railway system that can just shoot right on up to Minocqua and leave the interstate less congested, maybe have some railway cars that could put their boats on there for them too, so they could take them.
Bicycle on the
Kind of
side.
sidetracked us there, but I just wanted to point that out, that like where I have lived in the state, there has not been the service available. And it could have made a big difference in my life, like it did for Derrick, and what I was able to do with my family, and looking at that now. So that's a really exciting opportunity that a lot of people in our state have been missing. So stories like that would be really compelling, I think, as well.
Thank you, Senator. Chris, to your point about, and I'm not an elected official, but to your point about hearing from constituents, I was fortunate enough a couple of weeks ago to get a meeting along with several mayors in a district here in the state that does not have rail service with their congressperson. And we were fortunate, we got an hour conversation, and it was very engaging. He's from the GOP side of the aisle, and knew about the issue, had heard from several business people in the district about the issue. And what he told us after we sort of talked about the facts, talked about the stories, explained the corridor ID is, he complimented us and he said, let's you guys do more of this so that I hear from more people, so that it helps to support my vote in the Congress when it comes to the surface transportation reauthorization, which Debbie talked about, the bill that gives us all of the resources for corridor ID. It expires at the end of September next year, and it needs to be reauthorized. And that congressman sits on an important committee. So that's one of the things that we as advocates need to do, is to make sure that the citizenry and the business community that is in favor of this reaches out and talks to not only their state legislators, but their U.S. representation in the House and the Senate too, because that's really important.
Question?
She asked if I could tell you who that was. I guess I'm on it was Congressman Weed, 8th District. He's on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So reach out to him and tell him your story, and get other folks in the district to tell that story and how this would help benefit their lives, and how you think it would benefit the district.
Yeah, and on that benefit piece, I think too, that when you come and talk to legislators, because everybody needs funding for something, right? That's just part of the way it is. And so anytime you can say, yeah, you're going to invest over here in rail, but it's going to stimulate all these businesses and all those people in your district that have been pestering you to find a way to get workers into their neighborhoods. You've got a solution, right? So it's a way to kind of offset the pain with the gain. So anytime you can do that, it makes it, they're like, oh yeah, I can sell that, right? I'm going to spend $10 over here, I'm going to make 20 over there. I'm going to solve this problem by helping, I'm going to make 2 sets of people happy rather than 1. That kind of thing, so.
Derrick, just going back to what you said, what you shared about that experience was terrific, and it reinforces these points. And I just wanted to say thank you to you and to ELPC for doing this work. It's so great and so helpful to have somebody, professional like you, working in Wisconsin.
It's all about the and.
And we've got some time for questions from the audience.
Question out of the chat, and I'm going to remind you, I'm just the messenger, okay?
Oh, boy.
You take this one.
It's from Scott Rogers. What are the prospects and/or barriers to getting Republican members on the caucus?
Contact them, tell them that it's important to you that they be part of this caucus to learn more about what the passenger rail can do in our state. That's if you are in a Republican district or a district that has a Republican representative or senator, contact them and say that, hey, this is a bipartisan passenger rail caucus that are looking at opportunities in our state and how it can impact your district.
And so, I don't want to be a wet blanket or anything, but there are a lot of things that go through Assembly, and they have a lot of support on both sides of the aisle, but they never make it to the floor. And that's because the Speaker has the power to either put something on the agenda or not. And if he chooses not to put it on the agenda, even if there's 90-some members of the Assembly signed on to it on both sides, it's not going on the floor. So, voting matters, elections matter, you know, I would just throw that out there to you.
To introduce me, Frankie DeMine from Green Bay. 15 years ago, opposition to the Milwaukee-Madison line successfully marketed to the rest of the state, or particularly anywhere north of that line, that this line had nothing to do with them and wasn't any use to them. The state at the moment does not support a structured intercity bus network which would be necessary to connect to an effective rail network. And I wonder if you could comment on why it doesn't support intercity bus effectively and how that might bring in people in the rest of the state to support it rail as part of an integrated transportation system.
Okay, I'll try to take a shot at that. Maybe I'll get part of it, and then some of the others here can address it. So, the bus system in Madison serves the Madison area. I know there's a couple of the communities outside of Madison that contract with Metro to move folks back and forth. Sun Prairie and the out by Epic and Verona, I believe it is. They actually have their own bus that they that comes in, picks their employees up and takes them straight to Epic. And they call that time that they have on the bus their 25th hour because they don't have to drive. That's their option. You know, there's not a rail, obviously, but so I think the opportunity is there, but I think it's a piece of the puzzle of the equation we're all trying to solve. You know, everything isn't going to happen at once. It's that classic case of if you build it, they will come. So we need to start somewhere, right? So you need to get your base in place, and then I think you can build on it from there. And Mayor Sacha does have some brand new buses that we've all seen, if anybody here in the Madison area. So we could give them a good workout with that if we were to get rail to be able to move the people to the rail they need to get to get to then where they're going. So.
I would suggest, and this is more based on sort of my observations rather than necessarily expertise and past experience working on these issues with my previous employer. First, I do want to give a shout out to our friends at the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. My perspective is a little bit more broad than just here in Wisconsin. I would say that they have done as much as they can do within the limitations of the state budget to do some coordination. Amtrak has done some coordination as well. Unfortunately, the state contracted and worked with Amtrak to establish the I-41 corridor connecting Green Bay, Appleton, Fond du Lac, and Milwaukee to Amtrak trains at the Milwaukee station. Unfortunately, because of the inability to raise that budget number, that bus had to be cut. This afternoon, after we're done here, I'm getting on a coordinated Amtrak Van Gelder bus to ride home to Chicago. And then yesterday, I got here using a Jefferson Lines bus that left the Amtrak station in St. Paul to bring me here to Madison. So there is some coordination. I think the state is trying. I think we're seeing more of this around the country. It's an issue area that is important to me at ELPC, and I think I'm impressing that upon our leadership. I think we need to work on sort of our bus programs on a federal level. Stuff tends to be very siloed, where the bus funding is in one silo, the rail funding is in another silo, the aviation is in another silo, but it's difficult for us to get those systems to coordinate with each other. So some progress has been made. There are some services that are in place, but we could absolutely do more. And I would suggest that if that's important to you, make sure that your legislators know as well, to give Wisconsin DOT the sort of backing that they need to actually make the system be even better.
I think along with that too, if we look back at 2010 and the governor's race, that how important it was to have a governor win that supported it ultimately, because Scott Walker did not, and he ultimately is what determined whether there was that train between Milwaukee and Madison. And so we have an election coming up. Make sure you ask candidates how they feel about passenger rail systems in our state. What is their stance on it? What would they do? How would they support it? It's not an easy question you asked. It's kind of funny, you just dropped it and went and sat down. And let it sit there. And it's a bigger conversation, ultimately, not just about railways, but it's about talking about your neighbors and community and your state, why it's beneficial, even though it might not impact people up in Wausau right now, why it's beneficial to support it. I lived in Waterloo, Wisconsin at the time in 2009, 2010, and the talk of the train going through there, I don't think there were conversations with city officials there, at least not that I heard. And so some of those rural areas kind of felt like they were left out. And so having the conversations is really important with the areas where the train will go right through and it might not have stopped, to let residents know why it's important there and how it will impact their communities. So it's all about conversations too, and having them, and just thinking about the greater good of your neighbors as well, because what does happen down here impacts up north and vice versa. I mean, you can look at tourism in Minocqua and how important that is to that area and our state, because Illinois goes right up there and that impacts our economy throughout. So my thing is conversations and ask gubernatorial candidates.
Peter.
My name is Peter Jacobs. I'm from Sheboygan. I have mostly comments. It was great to read in the Examiner about your trip, the coalition's trip, and to hear. Well, we've been talking about talking to our legislators about this, which just seems like kind of a top-down approach. And I wonder if a bottom-up approach helps. That I can tell my neighbors who drive their car to the grocery store that, hey, you know, there's another way. There's public transportation, there's buses, there's trains. And I don't know how we do that, and if that means that it's some kind of marketing thing from us to go from bottom up. And when the bottom comes up, you guys will hear about it.
A great feedback that we'll take back to this rail caucus to have the conversation, because it needs to be coordinated, right? Like, it's hard at the local level to start something that big, but certainly it's important to talk to your local elected officials too, to raise the awareness on that. And at the state level, we can work with local electeds then to try to implement something. It's a big ask, but it needs to start somewhere, right? And so that's what this rail caucus is all about, to have those conversations and start getting things moving. Thank you.
Let's do one more, and unfortunately this will have to be the last one, but
All right, so my phone's a little tall. Just wanted to ask, congratulations on forming the caucus. My name's Noah Subcheck. I'm a student here at UW. I presented earlier. I just wanted to say, caucuses are formed for a purpose and for a reason. What is the caucus looking at getting put out to the floor? I know we're not in session right now, but what are we looking at getting hopefully voted on for the end of this legislative session?
From my understanding, and we're not chairs of it, so we're just members, did not start it. My understanding is it's to have policy ideas put forward by legislators to see what can be done. And having the train ride was part of understanding what it all entails and the importance of it. And I don't think there's been another one scheduled.
Not yet, yeah.
Lori Palmieri with Oshkosh.
Yes.
And Ahmad Rivera Wagner, I think, is the other co-chair.
Green Bay.
In Green Bay area. And so it's great that we were here and we can bring back these ideas here, and certainly Gary Goike, I'm sure, will share with us things to talk with the caucus about too, so that we can put something forward, or at least work towards the next session, because we are getting kind of late in this session now. But we want to put something forward that helps all of our state. If you can tell by our answers how we really think this is a great idea.